Hi guys, and welcome to another Whiskey Geek video. This time, not a review, not a blind tasting, something a little bit different. So we were lucky enough to visit Isla back in March. We visited each of the operating distilleries and brought home with us an amazing selection of whiskies. Since then, and whilst we were there exploring the whiskies and doing my reviews and my notes, I kind of noticed these typical styles begin to emerge for each of the peat flavours of the distilleries. And as I'm drawing this kind of Isla peaty focus for the channel to a bit of a conclusion, I wanted to share my thoughts with you guys. So here it is, my Isla peat matrix. Now this is intended to show what I found to be the dominant peat flavours for each of the distilleries. That's not to say that something sat under earthy doesn't also have maritime or vegetal influences, but more that the earthy flavours are the most character defining, the most prominent elements. Now the first distillery that I wanted to plot on this peat matrix is Kilchoman. Now that might seem like a little bit of a weird choice, but I found it to be a really nicely rounded peat profile. It's smack bang in the middle of the matrix with a nice balance of earthy, smoky, maritime and vegetal. And this is possibly best showcased in their Makia Bay expression. This is a relatively young, no-age statement, which means that the cask influence is relatively restrained, allowing the peaty profile to take precedence. Now Kilchoman are also malting and smoking their own barley for limited releases at the moment, and this own malt brings a much more vegetal character to the peaty profile. Expressions like the 100% Isla Barley series really show this off well. I believe it's a combination of the peat that they're sourcing, but also this own grown Kilchoman farm barley that marry together to bring a much more vegetal tone to the whiskey. Now next up we're going to be putting Laphroaig on there. And Laphroaig do use a portion of Port Ellen malted barley, but they mix it with their own malted barley, which is about 20% of their own malt, but it's been peated with a very distinct coastal peat that's been submerged in ocean water repeatedly, and they peat it to a heavier level, higher ppm than the Port Ellen malt comes to them at. So it has quite a heavy influence. Now Laphroaig typically presents with this smoky, maritime and earthy peat profile, and this is showcased fantastically well in the punchy quarter cask expression. I love this whiskey. Now interestingly, the 10-year-old, which they're possibly more well known for, sacrifices some of that for more cask influence over the increased age, and it's got more of this dry ashy wood. Not something that I necessarily think benefits it. I much prefer this one. Now let's continue with the famous three by plotting Ardbeg on there. Now I found the consistent flavours for an Ardbeg seem to be this really quite clean and crisp smoke, backed up by a fairly unique minerality. Now some of their expressions have some more vegetal tones, some more maritime tones, but the quintessential Ardbeg for me has to be the Ardbeg 10-year-old. This is a fantastic peaty whiskey, age statement and at a decent price point. Every time I sip this, it seems to give me just a little bit more nuance, a little bit more to explore. Really thoroughly enjoy it. Now that of course leaves Lagavulin. Now this is one of my favourites because it's the first Isla that I really sat with and began to appreciate properly. This wonderful, earthy, damp, mulchy peat, and it's very characterful and deep flavours. The 16-year-old has to be the go-to expression. This is an absolute gem of a whiskey. Offering us an interesting combination of maritime and vegetal flavours is Bowmore, often showing up as this coastal wet stone and cereals. It's really well showcased in their 12-year-old expression. Now Bowmore doesn't necessarily engage with a lot of people sometimes, but it's got this really quite simple charm which I quite like when I'm in the right mood. Now I'm looking forward to getting my hands on some independently bottled Bowmore so that I can try it unchill filtered and uncoloured, because unfortunately it does show that it's been tampered with quite a lot in these expressions. And now for something a little bit interesting, Port Charlotte made at the Bruichladdich distillery. Now, it was sipping a Port Charlotte that really highlighted the importance to me of peat provenance. Bruichladdich are super keen on talking about the importance of barley provenance and talking up the Isla terroir, but they don't actually use Isla peat themselves. They outsource that process, the process that brings all of the dark, the smoky, the oily, heavy flavours that Isla is now synonymous with, it's famous for. They outsource all of that to the east coast. They get it done near Inverness using Highland peat. Now don't get me wrong, I love Bruichladdich expressions and Port Charlotte expressions. I got stuck in a little bit of a Port Charlotte rut about a month ago, which I thoroughly enjoyed. But for me, the Isla peat is really, really important. The provenance of the peat, that's where the geography gets to make its mark. The history of the island makes its mark on the whisky. And Isla, because of its location, it's an island exposed to the weather, beaten and submerged by the ocean. It has a lot of unique flavour, and that is why it's an important island and considered its own Scotch province. So for me, this one's a little bit interesting because they aren't using Isla peat. But the good news is they are planning on opening their own floor maltings and their own kilns, so that in the future they will be malting it locally. They'll have complete control over all the barley, which is why they're currently, they're not using the Port Ellen maltings, because they want the control over the barley. But they're also going to have control over the peat, both how much peat and what peat is used. So I'm super excited to see, or taste rather, how this develops. For the time being, Port Charlotte seem to be offering this quite dry, mainland woody, ashy smoke with some vegetal characteristics in there. But there's quite a bit of variance in that. Because the distillery recently-ish reopened, they've just started to hit these age statement thresholds that they wanted. So the expressions are ticking over from no age statements to age statements, and things have progressed a little bit. More cask influence, more balance, slightly different peat, whatever it may be. They're beginning to settle, from what I gather. But there is also a plethora of limited releases. So many limited releases with weird and wonderful cask influences that things are quite variable within the Port Charlotte portfolio. The spirit characteristics also seem to complement their peat profile quite nicely. This hot, solventy and oily spirit, it overlaps with the peat and it melds quite nicely. I also think the all Isla maturation, every cask of Bruichladdich and Port Charlotte is being matured by them on Isla, that might be filling a void as well. Either way, try the Port Charlotte 10-year-old because it's fantastic. On the home stretch now, next up is Bunnahabhain. Now, Bunnahabhain is typically known for its unpeated whisky. They primarily make about 70% of their stuff is unpeated, but 30% of it is peated, and that is slowly increasing as demand increases. Now, even their unpeated whiskies carry this maritime influence because of the coastal location and maturation, but the peated stuff offers this lovely balance of smoke and earthiness. It's hard to recommend a peated expression because they seem to be either travel exclusives or regionally available. I would be more than happy to recommend the 12-year-old and the Storidar, but they aren't peated. If you do manage to find a peated expression, from everything I've tasted, they're well worth a try. Finally, we have Caol Ila. Now, this is the largest distillery on Isla, with the majority of their whisky going towards blends. They do also offer a very strong single malt lineup though, with really a gentler peaty profile, more of those earthy and maritime flavours coming forward. But then on the younger end of their lineup, you also get this dry, ashy smoke shows through. Now, because it's often tied to a softer spirit with some citrus and some fruit showing through, it really makes quite a nice introduction to authentic Isla flavours. The Mock and the Distiller's Edition are two of my favourites. So there we have it, my Isla peat matrix. Let me know if you disagree, if there's any adjustments you'd make. I've got a few more Isla related videos planned before I shift focus and admit that other distilleries exist again. But thanks for watching, guys. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please chuck a like and a comment below and consider subscribing. Cheers! We're talking all about the importance of peat.
You gonna be Daddy's video? You smiled at that. Do you want me to take him now?